Well, thanks everybody for joining us here at Prime Movers Labs webinar on scaling production and scaling manufacturing. I'd like to welcome all our audience members and our limited partners, founders, extended PLM family, and then a special welcome to all of our growth fund LPs and our other fund LPs. Quick introduction to Prime Movers Lab. We're an early stage deep tech fund. We're investing in breakthrough scientific inventions that have the ability to transform billions of lives. We're looking across energy, transportation, infrastructure, manufacturing, human augmentation, and computing. And today we're really taking the lens of how manufacturing fits into all of those different tiers, different peers that we're looking at. And the purpose behind this webinar is to share some of the things that we're thinking about, and then also to share these amazing folks that are helping transform these businesses and really scale these businesses, looking at some of the underlying philosophies and some of the underlying opportunities they're having as their business kind of has come from the seed and is heading towards wherever they choose to go with their exit. I'm Bryan Bauw. My background is industrial and operations engineering from the University of Michigan. Came out of there and joined a couple big blue chip companies to help them set up and run advanced manufacturing businesses around the world, and everything from auto carbon fiber layup to actuation systems to electromechanical drive systems. Joined Prime Movers a couple months ago. Really excited at the opportunity to see where manufacturing is going across so many different sectors. And so, again, thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'll introduce my co-host, Carly.
Gosh, that was bound to happen. For those who don't know me, my name is Carly Anderson. My background is in chemical engineering, another one of the partners here. I typically look at things a little bit earlier than Bryan on the early startup. Okay, the science risk has been eliminated. How is this going to scale going forward? And I'm really excited about the different folks we have representing very different product areas at different stages in that manufacturing scaling process. Before we jump in, a couple pieces of housekeeping. Anyone new joining us, our webinar series runs every 2 weeks, same time, same place. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking about synthetic biology. We're going to keep this to an hour. And we really encourage you to please use either the Q&A feature or the chat to ask questions. I'll be watching those very closely, and we'll do our best to weave all of them in, especially later in the conversation. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to the really important cool people. Michael, could you give us an intro on yourself and what you're working on?
Sure. My name is Michael Landry. I'm Director of Engineering at Paradromics. My background is in biomedical engineering. Most of my career has been in orthopedics, about 25 years of taking products from a napkin sketch through manufacturing and launch into human use. Although just recently I joined Paradromics, which has been quite a shift for me from orthopedics to human augmentation. So we're working on a assistive communication device for quadriplegics is our first application, basically a brain-computer interface with the goal of allowing people who are locked in, meaning they have very little communication channels out, to communicate with a computer just the way that you and I would, and at the same data rate that you and I would. That's our first application. We have dreams to do much more than that as well.
Wonderful. Russell, you're ready. I saw the microphone come down.
The microphone go down. So, hey, I'm Russel Vernon. I'm co-founder of Diamond Age. I've been in manufacturing 30 plus years, did a long term in some recycling and then into consumer products goods. A lot of factories around the world, a lot of high speed products. You know, I tell everybody I lived Six Sigma where I had factories doing 4 to 6 million units a day. So really understand that side of the house, and moved on to kind of high tech, did a good stint at Tesla. Helped launch the S and the X and Model 3, went and built some drones for a really excellent medical delivery company, and finally had one of my close friends convince me that why should you be in the pan? Why don't you just jump in the fire? And about 2.5 years ago, we started a company called Diamond Age, which is re-envisioning how homes are built at a production scale And Diamond Age is taking homes, building them at the site, and using a robot collaborative approach to take 50 to 60% of the labor out of a house and enable craftspeople to do really detailed and oriented work, and let robots do the heavy, dull, and dangerous work, and really focusing on bringing the cost of homes down, bringing the delivery times to a much shorter level, and really making housing more attainable back in this country to unlock and enable the traditional American dream of 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage, yard, and a dog. You know, we want to we think that's slipping away, and it's super important for us to go out there and drive.
All right, Ben,
Yes.
follow up that dream.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Silverman, CTO and co-founder at Upward Farms. My background's in architecture and engineering, and my previous career was in prefabrication and modular construction for building enclosures. This was basically manufacturing building enclosures offsite, bringing them onto the site, and then installing them. And I have brought that discipline to Upward Farms, where I oversee everything from R&D through to new project implementation. And at Upward Farms, we are manufacturing salad greens and fresh fish using natural ecosystems. So we rely on aquaponics, where we use fish waste as fertilizer for plants. And our philosophy is to let the natural biology do most of the work for us. We're just there to kind of harness the power of those ecosystems and to get those products into a package fresh, safe, and cost effectively.
Please, Christina, I saw you ready.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Yee. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Vaxxinity. I am a cell and molecular biologist by education, and I've spent over 25 years in the drug and biotech industry, mainly around cell and gene therapies. I spent quite a bit of time at some smaller companies that are working on cystic fibrosis and other immunological diseases, and then also spent a significant amount of time at Amgen before I came to Dendreon, where I spent 11 years and helped launch the first personalized immunotherapy for advanced prostate cancer in 2010. And then 6 months ago, I was recruited by Vaxxinity, and we have a synthetic peptide platform in which we are able to safely, effectively, and at a low cost manufacture vaccines for COVID and for other chronic diseases. So really exciting new platform. Our motto here is we're looking to democratize health and make sure everybody that needs a vaccine can actually receive it, both with our transportation and logistics, being able to deliver these vaccines globally and at a low cost to the people that need it. Thanks, happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for the quick introductions. As you can see, we have quite a range of production capabilities across the different types of businesses and sectors. Really looking forward to seeing where this conversation can go. Well, let's start off with a kind of generic, what does scaling production look like at a top level philosophy? Russell, can you give us a picture of what you look at from a scaling production?
Yeah, scaling really is a super challenge of all manufacturing. Is you're really taking your organization at all levels, and scaling requires you to grow everything: your logistics, your hiring processes, your accounting, obviously your manufacturing, your design, while keeping the same culture, same performance, the same nimbleness that you had at the let's make one level, which is super difficult. You know, and the thing it comes down to, I think, is that when you're making prototypes, when you're in that early phase, you have direct control over what's going on. Scaling is, hey, you have to have control over your processes, because unless you have a super vertical company, you're going to farm out things, you're going to have subcontractors, suppliers, different things coming in. So you go from that direct control being this key to success to process control being the key to success. And whether, you know, like I said, for us, we're going to have people build parts of our robots. We're not going to be a hard iron manufacturer. We're going to send that out to specialists. So it's really looking at taking what your basis is of your product, your focus of your company, that culture, and then building that into a process environment to say, okay, we can take these things, we can make sure that our suppliers, our customers all understand what we're doing and have that same result, because everybody has that example. You know, the best example people know is, I had my favorite restaurant and they added 40 more tables and they went to hell, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
scaling failure at the local strip mall level. But you know,
Absolutely.
when you do that with 100 million or 500 million in assets, it hurts a lot more.
Absolutely. Thanks. That's a really good overview. You touched on a lot of good keys there for some of the scaling challenges. And that process control for me is kind of one of the ones that also comes to the forefront when I think about scaling. And Ben, I'd love to hear kind of from the ag side, what you're thinking about for indoor production as far as process control as you're scaling those businesses.
Yeah, so for us, it's a mixed bag. There's some things about scale that are just an automatic huge step for us. So with biological systems, bigger systems are more stable. When we have these really small fish tanks and smaller growing systems, the edge conditions are such a higher percentage of your growing system. Whereas when we start to scale, we're able to balance all of our temperature set points, pH, EC, all these things are much easier to control because you're starting with a mass and kind of this overall riding like kind of conditioned water and air, et cetera. So those parts, we look forward to the scaling. We don't see it as a challenge. We see it as a benefit. It is important to make sure that you have the right control systems in place and to really have the right interfaces. You know, as you scale up these systems, it's just important that you're able to react and kind of balance them as needed with appropriate HMIs, et cetera. But it really then goes back to
What is an HMI, Ben?
human machine interface. So, I mean, it's just a fancy word for where our operators are going to interact with all of these sensors and relays and controls of our agricultural systems. And kind of their means to kind of check in on the life stats of kind of your growing system. And so it's just really important to have a system when it gets bigger that they're able to quickly adapt, react, et cetera, if something is going in the wrong direction. And so, you know, and then obviously with that comes training and making sure that you have enough employees and enough people to react and jump on issues with the growing system. And that are all trained on how to operate it as needed. So I think it goes back to more the operation of it, the people of it is, and training everyone becomes more of the challenge than the biology itself.
That's a really interesting point. Christina, I'd love to get your input on that kind of same, what are your quality controls given you're putting vaccines out there?
Yeah, it's definitely scaling is one of the biggest challenges. And in the drug industry, you also have comparability, right? So going from a 5-liter scale to 100 to 500 liters, lots of challenges there. And you're talking about using live cells. So example is, you know, do you use the same ratio of media each time you scale up? It's a simple thing to think about. Media is what feeds the cells. So, you know, do you use the same ingredients? I think Russell used the restaurant analogy. It's a great one. You know, let's say you're an Italian restaurant and you change your tomato base. Like, how does it change everything else about the dishes that you're serving? And in the drug industry, we are heavily regulated. So you have to be able to show that quality control at every level, even as you scale. And in which case it ends up being a time issue. You can make anything as long as you have the right amount of time and the right people looking at it. However, in a time like COVID, we call it COVID time at this point, everything's a now. And there is just a strong need to get this vaccine out that we're working on. But at the same point, you can't rush quality. I saw a really great article that says, and you can't make it go faster by yelling at it. So you just have to build the processes in place to make sure you are delivering the same product every time, no matter what scale or where you make it. At Vaxxinity, we have over 8 different suppliers that we're working with to help make our drug, and you have to just make sure you're building control from the very beginning and quality from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's a really good point, building it in, making sure you're monitoring it. Michael, I know as you're kind of looking at what you're doing there at Paradromics, you're taking a very, very fine instrument and you're going to be trying to scale that. Can you give us some of the nuances of trying to scale your product as far as quality control goes?
Yeah, we're at almost the opposite end of the spectrum of what Christina is doing, although we are putting things in place to be working under a very regulated environment. So we do have that in common, but the quantities we're talking about are just completely different. Our whole team here is a group of very talented, highly educated scientists that have spent their entire academic career learning how to build single units of something and make them work through smarts and hard effort. And right now we have about 30 to 35 different, depending on how you classify it, processes that go into building one implant. And those have all been developed in parallel. And so our real challenge right now to scale is to take all these parallel processes that have been developed with, I call them dummy parts that are representative but not the same, and trying to do that entire process in the sequential order with just 1 or 5 or 10 parts at this point. So we're completely on the other opposite end of the scale. And right now, it's, for me, it's educating everyone here about what that means, because we're not building one-off anymore. So just the idea of regulated environment and the idea of process control are relatively new ideas to a lot of the people here in the building. And that's my biggest challenge right now, is trying to make that shift from, yeah, we can build one, but can we even build 5 at a time is a challenge for us right now. But none of these 35 processes that we're doing are easy, and all of them need development work. So we're just completely on the other end of the scaling issue right now.
Yeah, that's you're one of the earlier investments we got going right now, so we're excited to see where you go with that.
Yeah.
And
well, even if you look across our industry, I mean, I don't think there's anybody in our industry that is scaling to a level of what any of the other 3 here are talking about. We're all still talking about lot sizes that are extremely small.
Yeah, a number of people have mentioned, a number of you have mentioned the kind of organizational design that goes along with this quality control, and growing the right org comes along with it. I'd love to get your kind of takes on how you scale that production team and what you're looking at as far as trying to build the right team and trying to build the right training packages around that. Ben, do you want to lead into that, since you mentioned that as part of your challenge?
Yeah, part of the challenge is that we're doing that as we speak. So, we're about to scale about 80 times from this year to the end of next year in terms of our capacity. And so what we're going through right now is a process of figuring out all the key positions that we need to put in place. One of the key positions that we're really focusing in on now is the handoff from the construction and technology side of the business to the operations side of the business. Starting up a new facility, it's sort of not squarely in the wheelhouse of either the technology side of the business or the operations side of the business. You sort of need a special team to go in that can speak both languages and be there to work through all the challenges of starting a new facility, whether it's something was installed correctly or something was designed incorrectly. And so, that's actually what we're working on is basically a startup, stand-up team to manage that critical period of bringing on a new facility.
There's a nuance of that. What are you bringing on as far as full-time versus contractors? How much of that do you think is temporary versus those are folks that are going to carry on with the business? How are you thinking about that?
I mean, I think because we have a plan to expand nationally and start to build multiple facilities per year, we're actually looking at this team as sort of a traveling team that helps us keep continuity between our different manufacturing plants and carry over the lessons from starting up, one in Pennsylvania versus starting up one in Ohio, and to kind of bring the training, onboarding of not just people, but also systems from one new facility to the next. And so we are looking at this team as a full-time role at Outward Farms.
Nice. Okay. That makes a lot of sense, particularly as you're looking at the long-term strategy that goes along with it. Christine, I'd like to get your take on that and how your org design is working with Vaxxinity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we probably all see this scaling up, let's even say kind of a quality department or these teams isn't about you add one based on making one. You actually have to add a team to be able to even make one. And then from there, as you scale up your production, you add more people to the team. But you always need like this base kind of infrastructure to even get started. And I think that's, you know, kind of what Ben is talking about, right? It's interesting how many people you actually have to have ready to, even before you even make one product of anything, you have to have this base layer of people that can manage it and really get it going. And then as you scale up production, you will scale up the people as needed, but you will always need, you know, a core group, even to just make one versus making 100 versus, and then, you know, you start scaling. So it's just something that, you know, I've seen across the industry. It's interesting because, you know, when you start small, you want to start with, you want to be as lean as possible, but ultimately you do have to recognize there has to be people in certain roles for you to even get off the ground. And so, you know, I think what's been fascinating for me being at Vaxxinity is we've been a more small and mighty group, and now we're starting to scale because of the sheer volume that we have, but you still always need an infrastructure to really even get things going.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a big challenge, getting that base layer. What kind of key attributes do you look for as you're first putting those teams together?
Yeah, good question. And I think the other thing is, you know, the question I pose back to my panelists too is, do you start with the leaders first, or do you start with the people that are actually doing the work first? And I think it is going to be dependent on where you are. In an industry like mine, where we are heavily regulated, it is helpful to have leaders come in that have done this before, that could direct the people that we'll hire. And we've been following that method more at Vaxxinity than at my previous companies, where the leaders have been in there and you're just looking to hire in the people to actually go and perform the work. But I also think that it's really critical to recognize that you can't just be a group of leaders as well. You actually have to make sure you're hiring great people at all levels to really support the mission and the plan of the company and the goal of the company. I'm curious what my other panelists have, you know, in regards to that.
Absolutely. Russell, you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, one of the things we've looked at is the mix of people. I mean, I'm absolutely blessed to be working with the people I am. And we kind of look at it from a standpoint of, you know, we have it, and maybe it's not the best phrase, but we say you have to eat what you kill at Diamond Age, right? Where if you're designing a product, you're going to be the guy on the floor, the girl on the floor building that product. You're going to understand that product for every different dimension, degree, how it goes together. And that drives the design for manufacture process, that divides the sourcing process, that derives into your, you know, you kind of how you sequence the product in that process, so that people become those full subject matter experts. And that's how we're driving our scaling process as well. It really is. And early in a startup, it's all tribal knowledge. Everyone on the startup team, 5, 6, 8 people, pretty much knows everything about the product. Well, fast forward 18 months to an A round and 36 months to a B round. Now you have 160 people and nobody was there. You know, only 15 of those people were there for the first 3 years of the company. And how do you take that knowledge and transfer it to every new hire? And the way Diamond Age is focused on doing that is you come in, you build the actual product with your hands, you help design it, you help maintain it, you help grow it, so that we try to, you know, at some point in time, we're going to have to get into specializations, deep specialization in silos, but it really is, as Diamond Age is as a full team of pretty much factory folks, get in and, you know, where the value happens. It's on the line. It's where you build. It's where you put machines together, how you take them apart, how you clean them, and understanding it from that level is really key, I think, at least for the first 50 to 100 people in a company. And once you've institutionalized that, hey, start at the bottom. You're working in a restaurant, good. Here's the dishes, right? Start that way and work your way to the front of house. And everybody wants to be, you know, we said that when I was at Tesla. Every young engineer, all these women and men come in, they all wanted to be the person on the Nissan commercial sculpting the clay and making the new body and detailing the headlights out of clay. It's like, hey, you know what? You should spend 1.5 years be this door hinge person, right? You're going to learn everything there is to know about this door hinge, because that's all the scope you can handle in a 75,000 person company. And people don't see that. And we're trying to find the people that accept that like that, and that will grow with that. They understand that true ownership from base up. And the folks I'm surrounded with, just they embody that every day. And it's just, that's an unfair advantage I would think we bring to the party, is that kind of progression. Like I said, we feel if we can get to 50 to 100 people that have lived that same cultural thing, we'll have made that tribal knowledge, that tribal culture of get in at the basics, understand it, grow it, develop it, revise it, and then release it to others. then we should be, from 50 to 5,000 should be no problem. But if we lose hold of that before the first 50 to 100 people, that doesn't bode well for any company, in my opinion, on scaling.
That's a really, really interesting point and really valid. One of my first production job when I was running a team of about 100, my boss's boss handed me a clipboard and told me to go walk around and take notes and understand every process within that value stream before I could go manage that value stream. So understanding what the stream of work is and how it's going to progress towards the customer is fundamental for a good production process.
And that's Toyota. Toyota will not let you be a plant manager till you've worked 2 years on the line. Even if you have been a plant manager at 3 other plants, before you're going to take this plant over in Spring Hill or wherever you're taking it over, you're going to work 2 years on the line. And then, and it drives the respect, it drives the understanding, it drives the communication. So I think, where you can work it. And I don't have some of I think the life sciences constraints we have and the regulatory constraints and some of the certifications that you may have in other industries. So we're not building airplanes, we're not building injectables, right? So, but we do have a lot of processes that are regulated, but where I always suggest to people where you can do that really, really deep understanding and progression of your teams, drive it as hard as you can.
Awesome. This has been a really interesting, first kind of look at what kind of regulations come into play and what kind of people are needed to run these scaling processes. I wanted to add in a quick, again, we've got some awesome people here. If you have any questions about how people are making these things or more, maybe a little bit smarter questions than that, throw them in the Q&A or the chat. We've had our first one, which kind of leads into one of the next questions, I think, which is how do you scale the equipment? So you've talked about how to scale the teams, but how do you scale this equipment? And Russell, there's a question for you on, is Diamond Age named after the book, which is, I think, that Matter compiler specific piece of equipment that could make anything under the sun. So since we don't have that yet, you guys are here.
The book, I just bought 2 copies of Steal Like an Artist. It's an amazing little 30-minute read, but yes, it's absolutely stolen from that, or it's derived off a story. It's something like that, so that Neil Stephenson doesn't get mad at me. But yeah, Diamond Age is an homage to just the brilliance that Neil Stephenson had of eventually at some point in time, it's going to be raw materials in and product out, and that's what Diamond Age wants to do for home building.
Nice.
But scaling equipment, is that what you wanted me to cover, Carly?
I think, yeah, if you could say a couple of quick words to that and we could move around and
I think, scaling equipment is beg, borrow, and steal what you can at seed phase, right? Pre-seed, when you're on your own nickel, beg, borrow, and steal. When you're at seed, you have to be real careful of off the shelf versus make. Have to really have a good process around that. But once you get to an A round or a B round, like a scaling round, I think it really becomes is what is not critical to the presentation of that product. If you have structural things, if you have auxiliary things, get them out of your shop. That's not where you want to put your value. You want to put your value in is really when you want to put your time in things that truly drive customer value, things that touch the product, that make it a better experience, a better value for the customer, safer, quicker, faster. Focus on that, and the other stuff, find good partners to work with.
Yeah, I jump on that too. I mean, I think, we've been in business now 8 years. And like many of our competitors, first couple of years, we wanted to reinvent everything. And we quickly learned that was not the way to build a business, not the way to build a manufacturing business. So it's really been trying to figure out exactly where the bottlenecks are, how much can we rely on what the industry has already developed and configure those to our needs, and then find the specific points where we need to kind of come in and design and engineer ground up to allow us to kind of unlock further throughput of our production line or quality or yields of our product.
Michael, you mentioned the tiny lot sizes. How do you think through going from 1 to 10 to 100 or more with the equipment?
Our scaling issue will be managing scaling at third-party vendors, making sure that early on we're picking the right vendors, that they understand what our needs are, that they have a plan to scale with us as our volumes expand. And that's a conversation that has to be had real early, so that you're picking the right vendors to begin with. But when we do get to the point where we're scaling, that's going to be making decisions with our vendor partners to bring in more equipment, possibly change the type of equipment that we're being used, and those types of things. for us, especially right now, 80% of the work is managing the vendors, and that is how we'll be scaling initially. For us in the regulated environment, medical device manufacturers that are used to working under that environment, it's much easier for us at this point to move forward with somebody like that than it is to try to build those systems from scratch in-house. That takes time and effort and money, and would slow us down significantly if we were trying to not only build our device, but also build an internal quality system that would function at all levels that it needs to. So we leverage the fact that it's already been done at vendors, and scaling is really an issue that comes with the vendors, and having a conversation with them about what our quantity needs are, what our cost needs are, what our schedule needs are, and then working through those issues with them to make sure that they're ready for it when it happens.
You look at them from a capacity point of view, understanding they may have to scale some of their equipment. It's a really interesting challenge.
Yeah, for instance, right now, one of our bottlenecks is a wire EDM machine. It's just a pretty standard piece of manufacturing equipment for cutting metal. The one we use is quite specialized because it's highly accurate. And the facility that we're working with right now, they only have one of these machines. So we're probably 18 months away from them needing to have 2 or 3 machines. But we're already having that conversation because we want to make sure that they're going to be able to have access to the exact same machine. We don't want them to buy the latest and greatest machine, because now all of a sudden we have to qualify a brand new process on that machine. So we want to, so we're looking at things like that, making sure that the new floor plan in their new factory is going to have space for additional machines right next to the one that we have. Do they have the ability to add a second shift on those machines, or a third shift on those machines if we needed to build capacity? Those types of things. They already have all of the other basic quality systems in place, like metrology and inspection and all those other things that are necessary to build a part. Those operations are quite large compared to what we're doing. So we don't need to worry right now about scaling that type of thing. It's more equipment related and staffing related. When we get to the point where we start to bring some of that in-house, that's a whole nother project that'll change our organizational chart. It'll turn it on its head. So there'll be a lot of planning that has to happen before we start thinking about bringing this stuff in-house.
Okay. I think another thing that's been really top of all of our minds recently is logistics and supply chains. And I know a lot of different people have had different experiences over the last year. So I'd love to hear a little bit about either, what you did right at the beginning that made all of this super easy, or maybe what lessons were learned and could be carried ahead to future operations. What is the world going to look like following this? Christina, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure, and I'll follow up what Michael was saying too. I always like to believe, vendors are actually truly partners, right? Without them, you're actually not making a product. And so when you're partnering, especially in the early stages, sharing your forecast with them, making sure that they understand what the expected volumes are going to be, what the partnership is going to look like, is critical to the success of your own program. And so for us, this is, again, a very interesting time because we have a COVID vaccine. The needs we have under the COVID vaccine are completely different than what it will be after the pandemic goes away, right? The volumes we're looking at, the scale we're looking at is different for the rest of our chronic disease platform that we're going to be working on as well, right, in parallel. And so it is, at this point, it's a scale issue. And so supply chain concerns that we hear about in the news regarding drug supply and vaccines are real. It's tough. There's a nationalism effort going on globally, and a lot of people actually want to make the vaccines within their own countries. A lot of people, when they do make the vaccines in their own country, really don't want to share it with the rest of the world until their population is vaccinated. And so we're really trying to work through that, and you have to be really creative and have people that are willing to, I think, think outside the box in ways that you keep, again, your supply chain intact. We're a heavily regulated industry, so it's not like we can just go and, substitute something for, a vial just because we want to. We actually have to go through comparability studies and really work through protocols that the agencies review, and then they approve before we can do that. But as we go through this, the partnership, not just with the vendors, but with our suppliers of raw materials, is also critical as part of this whole, looking at the supply chain. And so it's a fascinating time. Really excited to be here in this moment, but I'm also excited to get over as well, to be over as well.
I wanted to add one thing that Christina made me think of, and Russell also mentioned it in the notes that we shared before, which is depending on where you're at in your scale and where you intend to be with your scale, really is a driving factor in the types of vendors you need to be talking to. For instance, we're a pretty small company. When we talk about working with a vendor, if we're going to a large company that is a huge OEM manufacturer, we're going to be a very small fish in a very big pond, and the RPO is going to be meaningless to their bottom line unless they have some personal interest in what we're doing. So we really look for vendors who are kind of in the same kind of size and kind of position in their growth and their history as we are, because we're going to be a much more successful partnership with somebody who has some of the same similarities. If we go to somebody that's too big, we will never be able to get the work done because everybody else's job is going to be a higher priority than what we're doing. And I think, Russell, you put that in your notes as to one of the things, and man, I couldn't echo that more, how important it is to pick the right vendor to begin with, and their size, their scale has a major impact on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, to follow that up, put that into words is, you want to go sell the aspirational goals of your company to a vendor. So you want to say, hey, I'm going to buy 5 this year and 10 next year and 25 and then 500. But those are the real numbers. I've seen too many people get in and say, I'm going to buy 10,000. And, you come in and you buy 200 and you've burned a relationship, right? That and knowing that, hey, I think in 2027, we're going to be a $6 or $8 million a year customer for you. And as a $60 million supplier, that's a nice, healthy number to be. You're up in double digits, you get attention in their scheduling meetings from their leadership team. So it's kind of stalking the vendors you want to be working with a year or two down the road. And it really works that way. I think one thing that people miss too, though, is scaling and logistics. It's, we've all probably seen these kind of cost of change charts where early on change is very, very inexpensive, right? Because you have time, you have money, and then you get later down there. We made a couple of mistakes here in Diamond Age, being kind of like half pregnant on decisions, where we said, hey, we need 4 of these assemblies, but we won't need all 4 for 3 months. Let's buy 2, test them out. Oh, now we got a week behind, and we missed our window for buying the other 2. So now we had to scramble and do redesign. So you really have to look at your decisions and say, is it really that expensive early? It may seem expensive early, but you ask yourself 12 weeks in ahead, right? 12 weeks in the future, your future 12-week self was said, man, I should have bought 4, right? And the same thing with signing vendor contracts is saying, do that early, get the capacity locked in. This is a capacity constrained world, right? And if it just comes down to, hey, you know what? I bought empty time in your schedule, or I bought raw materials, take the hit. Those are the type of things that when you really need it, it's going to be 5 times more expensive than you think it is, and it's going to take you 3 times longer. So you have to have a little bit of risk tolerance on certain things, especially commodities wise, because other people are just going to buy right out from under you. You miss by a day or two, and if you're buying commodities, I can see Ben smiling, right? They're going to be gone. We're hitting that right now. So, those are a couple of things, is that you have to balance that risk versus reward. And the earlier you do it, the better it is.
Ben, anything you want to add on that? Or
I was more nodding my head to I think we also had learned some of these lessons as we went from a bootstrapping startup to Series A and then to Series B, and kind of always looking to what's like, how do I just get by, and do I just buy the 2, as Russell's saying, buy the 2 now and buy the other 2 later, and then you realize, well, I probably actually need 8 of them. Your mentality around always trying to scrape by versus designing for operators to be comfortable, have all the means and tools and resources they need. And you really need to do that as you scale up. You can't keep skimping, and think about, capital and basically have the confidence that you're going to raise the capital if you've got the right business plan in place so that you can purchase appropriately as needed.
That's a really awesome segue into one of my favorite manufacturing topics, which is the kind of continuous improvement, employee engagement mindset that comes along with it. Russell touched on a little bit in his introduction of using some of those Six Sigma tools, but also the culture that comes along. I'd love to get y'all's take on how you're approaching that kind of continuous improvement mindset, particularly as you're scaling those businesses, and how you place priority on that thought pattern. Christina, do you want to open that one up?
Sure. Obviously, in manufacturing, continuous improvement is critical to the, success of the program. That said, in a regulatory environment like ours in the drug industry, you actually really have to spend the time to design it with the end in mind from the beginning. And the reason for that is any change, any tweak to your system or your process will impact the controls that you have in place, and thus you have to go back to the regulators, and make sure that they're comfortable with the changes that you've made. And it could be as simple as just a submission. It could be as complex as going back for another clinical trial. So for us, it's really critical that even though you always have to have a continuous mindset, especially in the manufacturing piece, for us in our industry, every change is regulated under a process control and has to get approval for all levels of the company. And then it could even have to be delayed because of the regulators that control what we do every day. So it's on our side, a little different. What we do want to continue that thought process. It's the little tweaks, kind of the daily, how do we operate changes that we promote a lot more. But unfortunately for us, once we get our process, it's somewhat locked until you're ready to make another big change and potentially even be willing to go back for another clinical trial to make the changes that you're saying. So it's different in my industry. I'd love to hear what my other panelists have.
Absolutely. Ben, do you want to jump in on this one? Do you have any experience in this one?
I mean, I agree. Part of it's just making, we're in manufacturing, and especially with these types of companies that we are all from, you're always both a technology developer and an operator. And so it's just important to tie those two cultures together. And, we have all of our engineers and project managers spend a day on the harvest and processing line to really see all the hiccups and the pain points there. And so that's how we're trying to tie it all together. But it's also about designing our systems for flexibility. I mean, we like to kind of leave things as open and fluid as late in the implementation process so that we can implement changes. And then also when we do get a certain conveyor in, or we do get a certain piece of processing equipment in, or growing system, we leave enough buffer space around it, enough power utility buffer around it, so that if we do have to make a change later, we don't have to do a whole new construction project. It's that you're just swapping in a piece of equipment instead of also swapping in new plumbing, electrical, etc.
Yeah, that's really, really key. And Russell, you have any thoughts on this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Continuous improvement from long-term manufacturing. I think, I've lived on large scale on that, haven't lived it as, food was regulated, but nothing like Christina's dealing with or Michael's dealing with, right? Where you're building appliances, you're building injectables. So, but the continuous improvement thing is really, you live it every day. If you look at one of the robots we're building at Diamond Age, we have 4 vertical column assemblies. There's 3 different versions of 4 right now. So, it took us the 3rd time to say we're going to build 2 of the exact same thing, and we're not done. So we add in the little tweaks, we decide when and where they matter structurally, so that's really, again, to my team is just amazing. And the process flexibility that they have, and the design for manufacturing process they did go through, and that continuous improvement is, the person that's spinning it in CAD is actually down there cutting out the parts and welding them together. So, overall continuous improvement at that level, but also the structure and the people, continuous improvement on people as well, of just saying, hey, go out there, understand, here's the budget, here's what we have to do. you can only handle so much bleeding edge technology at once. So let's go some tried and true technology here, but let's try to optimize with some newer things on the other end of the spectrum. So it really goes for processes, it goes for people, it goes for your operational design. You have to be trying to get better every day. And a lot of that is really the growth of the team together as well. Like I said, in the scaling thing, usually scaling in at least the venture capital world I've been around is, you get 50 to 100 and then it goes, wow, let's throw a 0 in that. And next year, let's throw a 5 in front of it, right? It goes 10x, 5x, and 3x. But by the time you get to that 3x, that's a 15,000 person company, right? And these things blow up in 8-year timelines. It's like, so how do you bring that continuous improvement where it's just not a presentation that new hires get? It's a company culture of saying there is always a better way, because the challenges don't get any easier as you go larger. So I think it's critical that you get everybody at their DNA level to say, I can do this better, we can do this better.
That's a really well said, and I like both of those points, because that kind of design with the end in mind, design for manufacture. I've been in a few places where people haven't thought about the manufacturing, and you play catch ball with that, and that makes it very challenging. I'm sure the regulation adds a whole another level of uncomfortability to that whole situation, but really good points, really good points. Michael, you have any thoughts in this space?
Yeah, at the position that we're at right now, I think I've been talking to people here about exercising our processes, meaning because we haven't done them very many times, right? And the more times we run through them, the more opportunities we have to mess up, the more opportunities we have to learn and do it right. So numbers that are easy to think about. I don't want to give our specific numbers out, but let's say I was building 100 or 1,000 parts this year, and I had all the parts I needed right now to get going. I don't want to split that up into 2 or 3 lots of a couple hundred. I want to split that up into 20 lots done every 2 weeks of 20 parts, especially at this early stage, so that I exercise the systems, the processes, and go through them over and over and over again. And if there's an error somewhere, you haven't burnt everything that you have. You've only burnt 20 parts, maybe 5% of what you're doing, and you learned from it, and then that error doesn't happen again. So at the stage we're at, it's all about exercising our process over and over and over again. And in my notes, I had the word dummy parts. There's always this temptation to say, well, we can do a few things in parallel at some point, and so we'll make these dummy parts that aren't quite right, but they're really cheap, and they'll teach us everything we need to know. Well, that's really tempting, and you can make progress that way, but when you go and try to string 30 different processes that have been developed with dummy parts together into a serial process, you realize why they're called dummy parts, because they're not the same as real parts. And if you've done this with a bunch of dummy parts over and over again, and then you go to do it with real parts, you realize that you've never exercised your process completely or transferred from process to process. So while we're at a very different scale than some of the other companies here, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I have a question kind of coming back to the why now that we ask a lot at Prime Movers Lab. So what kind of new process technologies or things have appeared on the scene that have either changed how you're looking at your manufacturing processes? I know you guys have been around 8 years, and a lot has changed in robotics, autonomy, automation, et cetera. And how do you adjust if new things come in? Michael, new materials, new other resources as you're scaling.
So I mean, for us over the past 8 years, the biggest change has been the cost and efficiency of LED lighting. And I think that's the biggest, like, why now for indoor vertical farming. I mean, when we started out, the whole thesis was around, let's use rooftops, let's use free solar light to grow plants, et cetera, because we were scared of the cost of LEDs, and they've just been coming down in half, every couple years, and increasing in efficiency by 33% every couple of years. So we had to kind of like make this pivot back in, year 2 or 3 of our existence to that. And that was also the moment where we realized that we had to look at this as a manufacturing business, because that was the way to get to a consistent product day in, day out, that we could turn into something that you can grow for manufacturability, not designed for manufacturability. Growing for manufacturability was, how do you get a consistent product? And that required LED lighting, and that was enabled as costs came down, as cannabis business helped drive the cost of LED lighting down. So that's kind of was an adjustment there for us. And so we also have to plan for how do we future-proof our facilities to keep banking on the new, best, most efficient lights. And so it's kind of creating, we've developed in our system an easy way to kind of attach and detach new lights into our system, so that we can swap out when it makes sense economically to the newest, most efficient light.
Very, very cool. Christina, you guys are building a whole new platform. Has there anything that, has enabled that to kind of come into being in the past decade or so?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think COVID in itself is what's enabled us to really allow us to be front and center. And what you're hearing about, which is the EUA, emergency use authorization approvals that are getting made for COVID vaccines in general, has allowed us to propel our platform forward and show people that we have an ability to make a cost-effective vaccine that can treat COVID. But also what we're really excited about is the future of it as well, which is going to be being able to treat our neurological and chronic disease pipeline that we're building in parallel with all of the COVID vaccines that we're working, the one COVID vaccine, our lead COVID vaccine that we're working on. So it is interesting how it's our silver lining of a pandemic, if you think about it, to really be able to get our technology out there and make sure that people are aware that there's other ways to think about what a vaccine can be made of and composed of, and that it can be something that can be accessible by all, both from a transportation and getting it to the customers, but also being able to be affordable. And so we always like to say at Vaxxinity, vaccines matter, but vaccinations matter more. And that's definitely the truth.
Michael, Russell, any thoughts on this space quick?
Yeah, real quick is that, we've taken a look at it, and we look at things that we don't see a lot of progression in. Raw materials, steel, aluminum, commodities like that, they're going to price swing. But anything electronic, anything based off of moving and handling and aggregating and analyzing data, anything with sensing technology, we assume some fraction of Moore's law, laser sensor technology, ultrasonics, data collection. The storage is now getting just so cheap at the terabyte, even the petabyte level, that we've said, hey, we're just going to assume we're going to video this entire process from 60 different camera angles and have NASA grade telemetry on building houses, because storage is just getting continually cheaper and the pipes are getting larger. So we look at big, heavy, dumb things, they're not going to change a lot. But anything related to tech, we say 3 years out, expect it to be 25 to 50% better and 25 to 50% cheaper. So if it seems like a tough sell now, let's bet on let's bet on it being better and cheaper in 2 or 3 years. And I don't think we're going to get that wrong that often. So it's an exciting time. Things are just growing so fast. It's exciting to be able to say that and then bake that into a business plan.
Okay. It's really interesting focus on that. We got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask my kind of final question just to get a parting comments from y'all. What are the top 2 things you'd like to share with another up and coming startup that you really think are the keys to scaling? We've talked about a bunch of it here. If you want to kind of go back and summarize your thoughts there, or put something we haven't talked about out on the table, just to give them those thoughts as they're kind of focusing. So maybe some young entrepreneur that's in their seed round, what should they be kind of thinking about as they're journeying onto their Series B and Series C and beyond? Christina, you want to open the door with that one?
I was hoping you would pass the buck first. So I think I did say it for me in particular. I think it's really important to keep the end in mind. Like, what are you building and why are you building it for? If you don't have that, your North Star, it's easy to get lost along the journey. And you know, the other thing is, I think no matter what we are talking about, the people matter. So the people you're bringing on, it's not just who you can recruit, it's who you can retain. So it's really important to build a culture that you're proud of, that you're that can really make sure that you can keep the people that actually are making the products that we're so passionate about. And if you don't have that, then really, you know, we don't have an operating organization. So I think I would say, you know, keep the end in mind, and you know, make sure that the talent that you have worked so hard to recruit want to stay and stay with the mission that you've created.
Thanks. Those are two really powerful points. Ben, do you have any one you
I
want to
think
lay on top?
it's fairly similar, but the way I would put it is, you know, focus on the things that differentiate you and your business, and what you really excel at, and find a way to outsource or contract the things that don't separate you. You don't waste your time on that. If you're excellent, if your team is excellent at something, and you really know how to excel somewhere, do everything you can to get rid of all the things that are taking your time from doing that, because there are people with plenty of experience in all the other things that you could contract.
Yeah, for sure. Michael, any thoughts in that space?
Yeah, a couple things. So I think defining your scope really well and taking the time to do that so that you can avoid scope creep later is very important. It allows the organization to focus, and focus, like Ben and Christina said, is the key to success. And then I think beyond that, culturally, I think you have to hire the best people you can. And to me, that means finding really smart people that have really good knowledge in a very specific area that you need, but have a wide enough interest that they're willing to go and become that expert in something else if your business needs change. So it's really smart people who have a wide variety of interests and flexibility.
I like that. That's a really good point too. Russell, any final
this
thoughts?
one I'm going to attribute to my, co-founder Jack, is go talk to the people who are going to buy your product. We have had so many people in the home building industry say, you are out of your mind. That will never work. Like, okay, there's reinforcement why I'm going down this path then. We've had people, you should go build curbs. We had so many different people, and the ones that are just the egregious, you guys are out of your minds, I go, I am going to prove you wrong, and then I'm going to cite you publicly, right? But a lot of them are like, here's something that you guys are, your team is focusing on. It feels so close, but no one's put it together. Listen to those people. So Jack and I did that a lot. Is honestly, that's super early feedback, because when you're a couple of years from really hitting the market in the field, keep talking to people. Let them know what you're doing within reason, within disclosure. But the more you talk to people early and find out what they really wish if they had the magic wand, right? That's where you need to be. As everybody has that. It's right on the tip of my tongue. If this tech was here, I would buy it. If this product was here, I would use it. If these people could do this, I'd be so happy. And if that lines up with where you're at, you've got a winning formula at that point.
Yeah, those are all some really powerful points. Customer first, keep the execution and the team development at the forefront, and then also know where you're going. I really like that.
Yeah, and I'm just a shop ape. I mean, I'm an ape stuck in the shop, and Jack could still drag me in front of people and go talk to them. So, like I said, I got to attribute that 100% to him. But
we're at our hour moments, hour marker. So I'd like to thank our four panelists, Christina, Ben, Russell, Michael. I'd like to thank their companies for letting us have some of their time. I know you all are super busy trying to drive your businesses to where they need to go. So don't want to take up any more of your time than needed. I'd like to thank Carly for co-hosting this with me and keeping me on task, and Brad in the background, who's kept the whole thing alive. Again, really great conversation, and I appreciate it. So I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and thanks to everybody who joined us.
Thanks.
From all at Prime Movers
Pleasure.
Lab.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.